For established companies to become digital, I would say the first thing they need to recognize is how these startups really work. They don't start with some massive, grand plan of what they're going to be 10 years from now. They start with a little idea. And established companies need to embrace that. We're not trying to solve our customers' entire set of problems. We're going to do one cool thing for them. That creates our living asset, the component that will keep getting better and better and better. And one is all we need to get started. As we learn what our customers like and don't like, what they use and don't use, what they're willing to pay for and they aren't willing to pay for, then we can just enrich that one asset and imagine the next one. So what an established company should learn from a startup is this idea of minimum viable product, what it really means, and how we keep growing it and enriching it and then moving into adjacent innovations so that we just become more and more and more valuable to our customers. Now, for us to grow and become bigger and embrace even more things we can do, we have many alternatives. We can do it internally. Many of our people will be very excited. They can acquire the skills and they can take it on. Not a bad idea to also bring in some people from digital startups if they're willing to come. You'll have to change your culture to encourage them to come, but if they're willing, and they should change your culture to be honest, then you can bring in some people from digital companies. You can certainly acquire digital startups that don't have the underlying backbone they'll need to become big companies, and they're looking basically for a buyer so they can go off and start up another company. So I think we have many ways of growing our vision, but I think it is important to start small and to learn from failures and successes early so we make some good decisions going forward. I think as I have studied companies that are implementing all different kinds of these SMACA technologies, social mobile analytics, cloud, Internet of Things, cognitive, the whole bit, I would say that the toughest part of this is understanding kind of the use case. How would this add value? And because if it won't, it's really not important to use it. And so we've seen many. I'll zero in on cognitive computing right now. There's so much hype about it. Everybody feels like, I better do something. There has been so much wasted effort there, primarily because what the company went after didn't make sense to go after with a cognitive solution. All they needed was for somebody just to think more seriously about what business rules make sense for us. And shall we measure the outcomes of our current business rules to see if we could have better business rules? So for example, many companies are finding that you can apply intelligence to fraud detection, and it has value. But much of the value they get from fraud detection, they got before they ever went to cognitive computing. That was just a little bump as it got a little bit more precise in its understanding of what is a good indicator of fraud. Other companies try to uncover churn. Well, that's a really hard thing to understand. But if you use a cognitive formula here, a cognitive algorithm, you might get a bit of a bump. The problem is, if you don't know what to do once you learn someone's going to churn, if your reaction is, okay, now what? There was no point applying the resource to figure out better how to recognize churn. And I think for a lot of companies, this mistake is kind of being made day in and day out because they feel this anxiousness, this, we've got to do something about these technologies. Stick with the use case. What is the important need in your company? What do your customers really expect from you that you can't deliver right now? And then first, figure out how to discipline what you are doing, to understand what you are doing. Put somebody in charge of understanding that, and then let that person explain where you're falling short, where you just can't quite accomplish what you want to accomplish. Partner them with a technologist who can come up with some ideas on where to reach into that bag of digital tools to improve the situation. One issue that companies struggle with, and I would say especially in the IT unit, especially CIOs, is the concern that they need to have this underlying operational backbone. Somebody needs to watch after their ERPs, their CRMs, their master data. And it sounds so not glorious. I mean, it's just like, who wants to do that? And then there's this other part of IT, playing with all these new technologies, imagining new digital offerings, working with the product and the customer people to create new digital offerings. And they say, I don't know what I'm going to do about this boring part. I would like to just speak up on that issue, because one thing we've observed is, first of all, these underlying operations in companies do not become unimportant. They become much better if we use digital technologies like IoT, perhaps some analytics, maybe even some cognitive algorithms. These things become better operationally, and that is not about all the cool new digital offerings. That is cool technology, innovation in operations, which are so important to big companies. So I don't think people should start thinking that the operational part of their business is boring and the innovation part is about new digital offerings, and that's the fun part. I actually think all of this can be very exciting, and if it's not, if in fact operations in a company is totally uninteresting, outsource it. Give it to somebody who will find it interesting, and that would be the outsource partner. So do not create boring jobs in your company. That is just going to be a death sentence going forward.